What did you make, though, of the headline, though, that TPP is going to go ahead without the U.S.? The countries are moving forward with that, and also the concern that seemed to be more prevalent during this trip that the U.S. is receding from Asia and that China is really going to be taking the U.S.'s spot. What was your reaction to that?
No, absolutely. That did get some attention, certainly, and it is the case that the U.S. is seemingly pulling back more on a number of different fronts. Also here in the U.S., we have, of course, NAFTA, and Canada and Mexico also have been talking more together. So there's a general picture here that the rest of the world is trying to talk together and figure out how can they continue. But it's pretty clear that even on Asian trade agreements, it's harder on the TPP without having Asia just going alone, without having U.S. parts of that. So overall, there were some wrinkles here and there, but not something that made a major difference to how we look at the agenda overall.
Well, Torsten, was it at least a bit more reassuring for those who might have feared that a trade war was still on the table?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's a good point, Heidi. I think that those who feared that something dramatic was going to come out of that probably have a sigh of relief here that we didn't see any significant changes to the way global trade is organized, at least on the back of this trip here alone.
Yeah, so no significant progress maybe, but at least no significant deterioration, you could argue as well. Torsten, we had been looking at the perspective of maybe the US president. Some say he was on the weakest footing coming into this trip than any previous president doing this kind of trip, right? Does he go back with some wins? Does he go back in a strengthened position to be able to handle some of these domestic structural reforms like taxes?
Yeah, so I mean, all my client discussions at the moment are about tax reform. What did the House bill say? What is the Senate bill now going to say? And can there be some common ground? And all the subcomponents that go into that discussion. I think a fair description of this is that there's probably not much changing in terms of impact of the trip here to at least the tax reform. Of course, the trip is important on its own, and depending on what you put weight on, of course, some things have been very critical. But I think from a market perspective, I don't think there's much here in terms of the other many bullet points that markets worry about, which include also North Korea, obviously. But on the domestic front, there's a lot of other things going on, including the Fed, including what's going on with the outlook for inflation, and all that feeds much more into the debate about will tax reform give a big boost to the economy or not. And that's why I think that's why my Bloomberg screen is filled up more with stories about that.